Have you ever looked into the eyes of someone who gave you life and wondered if destroying that person would make you sleep better at night? I already. And worse, I did it. I destroyed my mother. But not for revenge. Or maybe yes. That's why today, with a lump in my throat and trembling hands as I write this, I still don't know if I was a coward or a heroine. My name is Lorena. I'm 28 years old, and I grew up in a house where the sound of silence was scarier than any scream, where family was too beautiful a word to fit what we were living. My mom, Marcia, she was one of those women that everyone adored on the street, smiling, charismatic. She looked like she had come out of a margarine commercial. But inside the house, she transformed into something that haunts me to this day. In the eyes of the neighbors, she was the solo warrior who raised her 2 children alone after my father ran off with another woman. At school, teachers always asked me how I felt being the daughter of such a strong woman. But the truth is that my mother was a tyrant disguised as a martyr. With me, she was controlling. With my brother, the little one Daniel, 7 years younger than me, she was cruel. She didn't hit, not in a way that left visible marks, but there was a way to break the boy inside, making every mistake become a reason for him to feel like a burden. I grew apathetic to it. His pain was the same I had already felt, and when we feel the same pain for so long, it numbs us, until one day he couldn't take it anymore. Daniel was 11 years old when he ran away from home for the first time. I found him sleeping in the back of the school where he studied, hugging a torn backpack and with a small box of cookies that I knew he had stolen from our pantry. When I hugged him, he cried so much that he wet my shirt. And he said a phrase to me that never left my head. "You told me you would protect me." I didn't answer, because at that moment I realized that I had never done anything other than survive. It was that morning that something changed inside me. For the first time, I looked at my mother and saw her as an enemy, and for the first time, I looked at my brother and knew I had to get him out of that house. But how? The answer did not come easily, because accusing my mother meant facing an entire structure that saw her as a victim. It meant breaking the silence, the same one I had learned to respect as if it were law, and it also meant running the risk of losing everything, or get a chance to start over. It was at this point that my story began to take shape as a dilemma: denounce the woman who raised me, or continue pretending that the hell we grew up in was just an imperfect home. In the end, I chose to speak out. What happened next is what will make you understand why, to this day, I still can't say if I did the right thing, if I was weak, or if I was finally strong enough to be what my brother needed, because what I did made my mother lose custody of my brother. And that was just the beginning. The day everything changed began like any other. Silence, cups hitting the marble, Daniel eating too fast, looking at his plate as if apologizing for existing. Marcia, as always, perfect. Starched white blouse, impeccable lipstick, and that sweet voice that only came out when she spoke to strangers. "I'm going to be late today. Don't wait for me for dinner," she said as she picked up her bag. And then, before leaving, he turned to Daniel and said the sentence that made me stop chewing. "If you get less than a 9 on that test again, I'll leave you sleeping in the backyard." She smiled, as if it were a joke, but we both knew it wasn't. The week before, he got an 8, 2, and she forced him to spend 2 hours kneeling in the corn of the neighbor's chicken coop, because education is learned through pain. She always had convincing justifications, so convincing that even I believed it for a long time. But something that morning made me think, if she was able to say that before 8 a.m., what else was she able to do when I wasn't around? That night, I made a decision. I contacted Sylvia, a social worker I met years ago, when my mother almost lost custody due to another episode of excessive punishment. I explained everything, every word, every invisible scar. Every night I heard my brother cry muffledly into his pillow, while my mother watched TV as if nothing had happened. Sylvia listened to me carefully. He asked me if I had any proof, and that's when the betrayal happened. Yes, I had. Because, weeks before, I had started recording secret audios. Part of me didn't want to believe what I was hearing, but another part knew the world would never believe me, without listening too. I sent the audios, and with them, I sent a photo of Daniel with his injured knees. Marcia said he had fallen while playing ball, but I knew he hadn't. Sylvia told me that she would contact the Child Protection Council. That's when my throat closed up. I felt like I was betraying my blood, but at the same time, as if he were trying to save what was left of our history. 2 days later, the world turned. A team showed up at the house with an official notification. Marcia looked at me with burning eyes. I knew. She knew it was me. And in that room, in front of everyone, she screamed like I had never heard before. "It was you, Lorena? You ungrateful! You will pay for this!" Daniel was standing behind me, shaking. He grabbed my hand so tightly it felt like he was trying to hold the ground with it. I didn't answer, because there was nothing more to say. In the days that followed, my mother went from being a warrior mother to a mother under investigation. The neighborhood was murmuring, but no one came near. I was called a traitor, heartless, even a poisoned daughter. But Daniel, he was sleeping. I slept through the night for the first time in months. It was there that I realized the humiliation wasn't just my mother's. I was also humiliated. Why fight someone everyone calls a saint? Makes you look like the devil himself. And that's why, at that stage, I started asking myself, did I do the right thing? Or did I destroy my family over something that could have been resolved another way? If there was another way, but what I didn't know yet was that my mother wouldn't accept losing, and what came next made me rethink everything. Even if I was truly prepared to protect my brother, or if I had just started a war I couldn't win. You don't understand what loneliness is until you watch your family fall apart and realize no one came to help you rebuild. That's exactly how I felt. After my mother lost temporary custody of Daniel, the Child Protection Council determined that he would stay with me. In practice, it seemed fair. I was already an adult, had a small rented apartment, and a remote job that barely supported me. But emotionally, I wasn't ready. And the city made a point of reminding me of that. At the bakery, the owner who had previously called me warrior's daughter stopped looking me in the eyes. At church, they excluded me from the youth group without saying a word. In the family's WhatsApp group, no one has even said hi since the day the complaint was made. I was buried alive by silence. Meanwhile, my mother did everything she could to look like the wronged martyr. She posted indirect messages on social media, made posts about ungrateful children, and even organized a prayer circle with neighbors, asking for strength to endure such an injustice of such magnitude. She used the Bible as a shield, and I as defendant. But the worst part wasn't the judgment of others. It was Daniel's look. He was safe, yes, but it wasn't whole. At first, I thought that just getting him out of there would be enough for everything to be fine, but he was a broken boy. And I didn't know how to cheat anyone. There were days when he would simply lock himself in the bathroom for hours, others in which I ate too much, or I didn't eat anything, and sometimes I just cried, for no reason, or with every reason in the world. I took him to a psychologist. At first, he didn't speak. Then he talked too much. My mother said I was a mistake, that I ruined her life, that if it weren't for me, she would have been happy. These sentences broke me, because I had already heard the same things years ago. And I realized, right there, that I hadn't saved my brother. I just took him out of the cage, but the cage was inside him now, and inside me too. Meanwhile, my mother filed an appeal. She claimed parental alienation. She said that I manipulated Daniel, that I was jealous of her, that I was always a problematic daughter, and she was convincing. Very. At the first hearing, when she entered the room with that fragile air, dressed in white, holding a rosary in her hand, I froze. For a moment, even I doubted myself. She cried in front of the judge. She said that she made a mistake, yes, like every mother does, but that she never did anything that would justify losing her son. She said she was being punished for loving too much. And then he looked at me, with teary eyes, and asked in a low voice, "Why do you hate me so much, Lorena?" I didn't answer, because it wasn't hate. It was something worse. It was disappointment. It was the realization that what I always called mother. In fact, she was a woman too broken to love someone without hurting them. But in that court, she won over public opinion, because the world prefers a repentant mother than a daughter who cries out for justice. And when the hearing ended, the judge postponed the final decision. That's when I understood. My victory was at risk, and I had little time. She wanted Daniel back, and I would do anything for that. And if I didn't act, not only would I lose him again, I would lose myself. Have you ever felt like you were sinking and then suddenly a last gulp of air makes you open your eyes? That's what happened to me. After the hearing, after my mother's feignedly hurt look, after being called emotionally ill by her lawyer, something inside me woke up. I could no longer let hers be the only story told. If I wanted to save Daniel, for real, I would have to fight with weapons sharper than hope. I would have to understand what she feared most and destroy it before it destroys us again. And so my plan began. First, I documented everything. I gathered reports from Daniel's psychologist, school records that showed how he had improved since leaving home, conversations with old neighbors who, confidentially, admitted that they had heard constant screaming coming from the house, but that they were afraid to get involved. I also spoke to Daniel's former teachers. One of them, Teacher Clara, cried on the phone. He was always a sweet child, but there was a deep sadness in that look. I should have done more. I took her statement in writing. I put together a complete chronological dossier, the kind that dismantles any facade of a good mother based on fantasies, not feelings. Second, I went after the past. I discovered, through a contact on the city forum, that my mother had old records in another state. Apparently before us she had another son, and this son was given up for informal adoption when he was still a baby. The information tore me apart inside. She always said I was her first daughter, and now I found out I was just the first one she kept. I couldn't locate this brother, but the fact that she omitted this gave me a clue. Marcia has secrets, and perhaps the greatest of them was yet to come. Third, I started recording. This time, not just audios, videos too. I began recording the moments when Daniel had meltdowns, when he flinched at the sound of screams on the television, when he said things like, "I feel like at any moment she's going to show up and take me." Those videos were painful, but real. That was what I needed to show, that her damage was not an assumption. It was a phantom presence, alive, haunting my brother's daily life. Fourth, I contacted a lawyer, a firm, empathetic woman with a deep anger against family injustices. Her name was Juliana, and in just a few days, she turned my chaos into strategy. She said, "Do you want to win? Then understand one thing. Courts do not judge love. They judge facts. And now you have the facts." And then she looked at me and added, "But it will hurt. You will lose what is left of your bond with your mother." At that moment, I looked at Daniel sitting on the sofa, hugging the dog I rescued from the street to keep him company. And I replied, "She never gave me a noose, just a chain." The decision was made. What would come next would be a war. But for the first time, I was armed. And for the first time, I stopped just surviving. I started to fight. I thought that doing justice was about shouting the truth until someone listened. But I've learned that sometimes the only way to be heard is to whisper in the right ear. And that's what I did. Behind the scenes, while my mother was putting on her act of being an unjustly treated saint, I was preparing a different stage, one where she would no longer have control of the narrative. The first piece I moved was Juliana. My lawyer worked with the public prosecutor's office to open a new investigation based on the evidence I had gathered. But unlike the previous time, she recommended that we not tell anyone. Justice has its own time, Lorena. But the noise... Oh, the noise only gets in the way. Let's work in silence. Meanwhile, I continued with my routine alongside Daniel. But something in him was changing. He had started to really trust me. One night, while we were having dinner on the living room floor watching a random movie, he turned around and said, "Lorena, do you think I'm a mistake?" The question took me apart. I put down the plate. I knelt in front of him, and with my hands on his face, I answered, "You are the best part of my life." He cried. I cried. And there, in the midst of the crumbs and doubts, I was sure I was doing the right thing. But Marcia, she also moved. I discovered that she began visiting different churches, leaving dramatic testimonies about how she had been destroyed by a wicked daughter. He gained supporters. Soon, people started sending me messages accusing me of being crazy, manipulative, demonized. One of them, a woman who called herself a sister in Christ, sent me an audio message saying, "You can fool judges, but God sees everything, daughter, and God does not sleep." I took a deep breath. I deleted the audio, and I focused on the plan, because I wasn't going to let her win the people's court. I was going to beat her where it really mattered. I then started doing something risky. I recorded some conversations with people who were on her side, friends who, without knowing they were being recorded, told about episodes in which Marcia left Daniel locked out of the house, or denied him food when he got bad grades. I put it all together. I sent it to Juliana, and she replied with a single sentence. "The time has come." We requested an emergency hearing based on the emotional risk to the child, reinforced by new documents and testimony. The judge accepted. On the appointed day, I entered the forum without makeup, without strength, but with truth overflowing from my eyes. My mother was there, dressed in white again, this time with a Bible in his hands. She looked at me, smiling. She didn't say anything, but her look said it all. "You may have won a battle, Lorena, but the war is mine." But she didn't know that I had already prepared the bomb, and she was going to explode there, in that room, with everyone present. Because the first to be called was Teacher Clara, and her words were the spark that started the fire. The room was freezing, not because of the temperature, but because of the tension that cut through the air like a razor. My mother sitting in front of me, still holding the pose, but her fingers drummed the rosary in her lap as if that could ward off what was to come. She didn't know. But everything she had hidden for years was about to be spat out loud and clear, in front of the judge, the prosecutor, the assistants, the psychologists, everyone. And it was Professor Clara who lit the first light at the back of the cave. She walked in, her steps firm and her voice choked. He said he taught Daniel for 2 years. He said that, despite being a well-behaved child, he was often exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes, and once, he urinated in the living room for fear of asking to leave. He would tremble when he got an answer wrong, and he would even apologize for breathing louder, she said, tears in her eyes. When asked if she had ever suspected mistreatment, she hesitated. I suspected, yes, but I lacked courage, and that's why I'm here now. It was like a stone thrown into a frozen lake. The first crack. Then came the testimonies of the neighbors, who agreed to give statements via video, maintaining public anonymity. I heard screams. I saw the boy outside on cold nights. We thought it was punishment, or maybe just a strange way of raising him. And then, the audios. Yes, the judges listened. The recording where my mother said, "You'll never amount to anything. I should have left you with your father, or better yet, I shouldn't have had you at all. Or even, if you tell me anything, no one will believe me. I'm the victim. I always have been." The judge paused the recording before the end. He looked at her. She had turned pale. His hands were shaking so much that the rosary fell to the floor. She tried to justify herself, of course. "They're set up. This girl has been mad at me since she was little. Ungrateful. Cold. This is a plot." But it was too late. The mask had fallen. At that hearing, justice began to turn the tide. It was no longer about a crying mother or a rebellious daughter. It was about a cycle of abuse, silent, cruel, and well-crafted. The prosecutor requested, right there, that Daniel's provisional custody be extended, and that the mother be prohibited from having contact with him until the final conclusion of the process. The judge accepted. Marcia screamed, "You will regret this, all of you. This is a setup. This is injustice." She was removed from the room, and at that moment, I felt strange. I should be relieved. I should be victorious. But all I felt was emptiness, because I wasn't fighting a stranger. I was defeating the woman who gave me life, and as much as it was necessary, it hurt. Daniel did not go to the hearing, on the therapist's recommendation, but that night when I got home, he looked at me with a calmness I had never seen before, and he said, "She'll never yell at me again, right?" I took a deep breath. I held his hand, and I promised, "Never again, Daniel. Never again." But inside, I knew we weren't at the end yet, because even when she was hurt, my mother was a woman who didn't know how to lose, and the final blow was yet to come. What is revenge, if not the inverted mirror of an old pain? I thought the hearing was the end, that my mother's screams echoing through the cold corridors of that forum would be her last attempt to reach me. But what I didn't know is that she had saved one last letter, a dirty, cowardly, and dangerous letter. 2 weeks after the hearing, I received a subpoena. My mother was suing me. He accused me of emotional abuse, parental alienation, and mental instability in taking care of Daniel. In the lawsuit, she said that I manipulated my brother into hating her, that I exposed him to traumatic content, and that I myself had suffered outbursts and should be evaluated by a psychiatrist. It was absurd, but well written. She had hired a lawyer known for manipulating the narrative in custody cases. And the worst part? He attached old photos of me, from a time when I actually went through a depressive episode at the age of 19. She made it seem like I was a risk, and I panicked. I cried. I screamed. I threw the cell phone at the wall. I had an anxiety attack that I hadn't felt since I was a teenager. Daniel saw me on the living room floor, curled up, and for the first time, he hugged me as an adult. "We won't lose, Lorena. You didn't hurt me. She did. I remember." And there, in that inverted hug, I felt that he had grown. But that was not enough for the judge. We had to present a new psychological report, this time about me. I had 3 sessions with a court-appointed psychiatrist. I told everything, no hiding, including my past relapses. At the end of the 3rd session, she told me, "You are stable, but you carry scars. You are not a threat. You are a survivor." And that gave me strength. Juliana, my lawyer, acted quickly. He countered every point of my mother's lawsuit. He presented new testimonies, including from therapists who had worked with Daniel, stating that living with me was healing, not harmful. But what turned everything around was Daniel. He wanted to write a letter to the judge. I was 13 years old enough for his voice to be, at the very least, considered. His letter said, "I don't hate my mother. I'm just afraid of her. With Lorena, I sleep. With my mother, I dreamed that I was in prison. I just want to live in peace. Please don't make me go back." The letter was read silently at the final hearing. Marcia, this time, was silent, pale, different. As if, for the first time, she had heard her son's voice as something real, not as an affront, not as a threat, but as a mirror of what she was, and what she never wanted to admit. The judge took a deep breath before announcing the sentence. Permanent custody for me, right to supervised visits for her, with review in 12 months. I trembled. I almost fell out of my chair. Daniel looked at me from the waiting room door and smiled. A small, restrained smile, but free. And there, in that moment, I finally knew. Revenge was not about destroying my mother. It was about making sure the cycle stopped in me, that it would not happen again with him. And yet, I didn't smile, because part of me was still bleeding, not for the pain she caused me, but for the woman she could have been, and chose not to be. The sentence had been read. The guard was mine, and my mother, finally, officially removed from power over my brother. But there was no applause. There was no immediate relief. Justice sometimes doesn't sound like victory. It sounds like mourning. In the following days, everything seemed to be on hold. The world was spinning, but we, inside it, were still trying to understand what was left of the two of us. Daniel started sleeping better. He started going out more, talking more, laughing every now and then. But there was something in his gaze that still carried a shadow, and I knew that shadow was the denied love of a mother who never knew how to be one. Even with the prohibition of direct contact, Marcia tried to send letters. The first arrived hidden inside a children's book, mysteriously left at the gate. I read it before he saw it. The handwriting was firm, impeccable, but the content, distorted. She said, "I hope one day you realize that your sister used you as a weapon. I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted you to be strong. She made you weak. But I still love you, my son." I tore up the letter. I burned the ashes. And for the first time, I didn't cry. It wasn't out of anger. It was because she no longer wanted him to feel guilty about her love. And then, the fall began. The accusations against my mother reached the Department of Education, where she had started working as a social advisor in a project with needy families. She was removed. Some local newspapers commented on the case, without naming names, but it was easy to connect the dots. The image she had built over the years began to crumble. The prayer friends disappeared. Her lawyer, in turn, withdrew from the case without public explanation. She was left alone. I heard from acquaintances that he sold the car. Afterwards, he left the big house where he lived and moved to a modest apartment on the outskirts. Every now and then, I hear that she was seen wandering the streets downtown, talking to herself, with the Bible clutched to her chest as if it could still protect her. And then one day, I got the connection I never thought would come. It was her. Yes, my mother. The number was new. The voice, lower, older, shaky. She said, "You won, Lorena. I hope you're happy." And I didn't answer, not out of pride, but because I knew that, at that moment, any answer would be too small for what it represented. She continued, "Is he okay?" And that was the only question that made me take a deep breath. "Yes, it's better without you." Silence. Then she just muttered, "Then maybe, for once, I did the right thing by losing him." And he hung up. I cried, but not for her. I cried for myself, for what this story stole from me, for what I needed to be, to fix what she destroyed, and for realizing that, even if I won, I would never come out unscathed. Justice had been served. Her downfall was complete, but peace would still be built, and not with shouting, judgments, or revenge, but with love, carefully, and with silence. Today marks exactly 2 years since I last heard my mother's voice. After that phone call, he never called again. He never wrote again. He never tried to see Daniel again. Part of me thought she would die trying to prove she was a good mother. But maybe she discovered too late that it wasn't. Or maybe he got tired of fighting. The truth is, I don't know what's going on in her head. And for the first time in my life, I no longer feel like I need to understand. Daniel is 15 years old now. He skateboards, has a best friend called Rafa, and is always making jokes about everything. There are good days, there are difficult days, but he is alive, whole, present. He still goes to therapy. And sometimes you still wake up in a cold sweat without knowing why. But you can now say, "I love you," without fear of seeming weak. The other day, he called me mom without realizing it, pretended it didn't happen, but I kept quiet. Because at that moment, I understood that the role of a mother is not blood, it's the delivery. And I gave myself for him, everything I didn't have, everything I had to learn alone, with pain and despair, I tried to be for him. And even with all the mistakes, he chose me. But now, With time, with breathing, with silence. Sometimes I ask myself, was I a heroine? Or just a broken woman trying to save what's left of herself and an 11-year-old boy? Did I destroy something that could have been restored with love by reporting my mother? Or did I just do what all silenced daughters dream of doing one day? Break the cycle? The truth is that I don't know. People want clean endings, right ones, redeeming ones. But not all revenge tastes sweet. Sometimes she is bitter, dry, silent, as was mine. And yet, looking at Daniel playing in the backyard, with his scraped knees and a light laugh, I know, if loving someone means protecting them, then yes, I did what was necessary, even though they called me a traitor. Even though I cried night after night wondering if I overdid it. Even though I lost the rest of my childhood in that courtroom. I would do it all over again. Because in the end, it wasn't just me who saved my brother. It was he who saved me. And if this is being a heroine, or just someone trying not to drown in their own pain, so be it. I survived, and so does he. And maybe that's victory enough.